big football news of the day is that Thomas Tuchel will be departing Bayern Munich at the end of this season, which comes as no surprise to anybody. If anything, I think the surprise is they're happy to retain him until the end of the season, and he's going to be allowed to see this one out, because whilst they're 1-0 down in the first leg, there's still a possibility they could go on and win the Champions League. But especially after the last couple of weeks of results, starting with a 3-0 defeat against Bayern Leverkusen in that title race. Really good game it was as well. I found myself really rooting for Bayern Leverkusen over the last few months. I think the first couple of months it's nice to see them up there, but you're always a bit hesitant. You just assume Bayern Munich will go on and do it. It's a bit like when another team starts leading in the Premier League. You just assume Man City will catch them up and go on and win the title. But over the last few months, it's become realistic that Leverkusen will actually go on and win the Bundesliga. So I found myself really rooting for them. And I imagine most neutrals are. You've got Xabi Alono, a really likeable manager, really good brand of football. They're the underdogs up against the heavyweights of Bayern Munich, who have won the last 11 Bundesliga titles. So I'd imagine most people are getting behind Bayern Leverkusen, hoping they go on and do it. Anyway, fantastic win a couple of weeks ago, 3-0, played them off the park. Alonso did Tuchel when it came to the tactical side of the game. 8-point lead at Bundesliga. You'd imagine they'll go on and win it now. Or in this case, the way Bayern Munich are looking at it is that Tuchel will go on and lose the Bundesliga title. Now they're still in the Champions League. They are 1-0 down after first leg to Lazio. I'd imagine that might become Tuchel's priority between now and the end of the season, because of that 8-point lead. They've got a tricky fixture against Leipzig this weekend as well. So I wouldn't say the title's over, but it's incredibly unlikely at this point. They can still turn around in Champions League against Lazio, and I imagine Tuchel will want to add another Champions League trophy to his CV before departing Bayern Munich. So he's got an opportunity to still have a successful season for him personally. While it would be deemed a failure for Bayern Munich, for him personally, winning the Champions League, I'll say, I'll take that, thank you very much. So off into the sunset, go on to my new adventure. So anyway, officially, Tuchel is leaving. And this may be of interest to West Ham United. Who thought we'd be discussing the possibility of West Ham hiring Bayern Munich's current manager? But here we are. You might not believe it. You might not think it will happen. But I do think there's a lot of credibility to this link. I do think West Ham should be interested, because now we've got the official confirmation. There's nothing stopping any other club approaching Thomas Tuchel's representatives to see if he'd be interested in a move to that club in the summer. And when you've got a manager whose contract's expiring, as we do, it would make sense if we're sounding out managers. Well, Thomas Tuchel is now there to be sounded out, to discover, is he even remotely interested in the West Ham job? And if the answer is yes, can we get him? If the answer is yes, that might make up their mind in regards what to do with David Moyes' contract situation. I think there's a lot of credibility anyway. Everything depends on what you believe. But from here on in is what I believe. I'm not saying you have to believe it. It's all opinions. But that's what we're going to be discussing today. Before we get into it, if you're new to Hammers Chat and enjoy this video, please do subscribe. And also drop a like on the video as well by clicking thumbs up. Helps out this video, helps out the channel. Makes me very happy. And this appointment will make me quite happy as well. And I believe he could be the perfect fit for everybody on the West Ham board. Now, of course, there's absolutely nothing to suggest that there will be a vacancy in the summer. At the minute, I think it's 50-50 as to whether Moyes will get offered a new contract, Moyes won't get offered a new contract. However, one of the things I think coming into play, which is preventing the board, or David Sullivan in particular, from moving on from David Moyes, is fear. The lack of obvious replacement. Who could they get in? I'd imagine that is playing its part in David Sullivan hesitating in moving on from David Moyes. And I understand it. The next appointment has to be right. Because I can't be the only one that's been underwhelmed by the names linked to the not vacant West Ham job so far. Julian Lopetegui, Steve Cooper. When these names are coming in connection to the West Ham job, I'm looking at it thinking, no, I've never been at the point of anybody but David Moyes. I appreciate some people are, and I get it. You don't have to explain it to me. I get it. But I haven't been at that point yet. I want a change in the summer, but I want it to be the correct change. I don't want a hurried decision, and I don't want someone like Lopetegui coming in. I want it to be a substantial upgrade, a worthwhile upgrade. I think Thomas Tuchel is that. He wouldn't be my number one choice. Let me make that clear. There's other managers I would prefer before him. However, when I think about, that manager, there's always a reason I downplay the possibility of getting him to West Ham. And it's usually David Sullivan. Either won't attract him, won't pay for him. Because I've still got in my head that if we're after a manager who's at a club currently, forget it. That might change. Sullivan may change and may be willing to pay compensation for the manager. I struggle to believe it. I've yet to see it, so I can't believe that just yet. And I know Tim Steidten's there, and you'd imagine he'd be okay paying compensation for the manager. But as we discovered in the January transfer window, he ain't the one in charge of the checkbook. Sullivan is. So the guy signing checks still has to sign off on paying compensation for manager. So I've almost ruled out to some extent bringing in a manager currently employed because of David Sullivan. Now, we know he has some filters. As we've seen when Moyes has been under pressure last season, the next guy would have to have Premier League experience. Well, Tuchel's Tuchel is ticking the boxes David Sullivan would require. Now, David Sullivan appears to be one of the hardest chairmen to please when it comes to a potential new manager. But even when you apply his very restrictive filters, unemployed, Premier League experience, Tuchel is ticking them. So I do believe that one of the biggest reasons Sullivan may be inclined to retain David Moyes is a lack of obvious candidate that suits him. Not him, Sullivan. Scarfman might prefer all these other managers, but in terms of Sullivan, the guy that's going to have to authorise it and sign the cheques, I'm not sure he will agree with it. But I think Thomas Tuchel becomes the perfect person, the perfect manager for Sullivan and Steidten if they wish to move on from David Moyes in the summer. Because we've just covered Sullivan. What about Tim Steidten? Well, again, this is why I said a couple of minutes ago, it all depends on what you believe. But the rumours are that Steidten was close to joining Chelsea. Now, I believe that. I believe there was advanced talks at worst between Chelsea and Tim Steidten. It didn't go through for whatever reason, but there was a lot of technical directors, sporting directors, director of footballs that were linked to that Chelsea job when Bowley initially took over. Then obviously Tuchel got sacked, Graham Potter came in, and I believe Steidten was on there, and he was one of the ones that had talks with Chelsea. It's maybe not factual, but it's one of those really strong reports and rumours which has never been downplayed or declined. So I believe it. I believe he had those. And I think that's what led to his mutual parting. We're getting a lot of that today, aren't we? Thomas Tuchel, potentially David Moyes. The mutual parting between Steidten and Leverkusen, I believe strongly, and I've covered it in various videos before, was because of those talks with Chelsea. That Leverkusen discovered Steidten was talking to Chelsea, willing to move to Chelsea, so they put him on the back burner and said, well, we can't if you're looking at leaving, we can't have you involved in what we're currently doing, because if you go to Chelsea, you go with our list of targets. We can't have that. So in March, he departed by Leverkusen. I do think it was because of the talks with Chelsea. So there's now a link between Steidten and Tuchel. However, I'm still hesitant regarding the fact that Steidten was going. I don't believe, so while I believe those talks took place, I don't believe Steidten was going to Chelsea because of Thomas Tuchel. Because I think a lot of the talks took place after Tuchel. So once Tuchel was sacked and Graham Potter had come in, I think the talks were still ongoing between Chelsea and Steidten. So it's not that he was coming to work with Tuchel, he's coming to work for Chelsea. He's coming to work for a Premier League club with a lot of money to spend, as they were at that time. They're spending like it was going out of fashion. That's going to appeal to any director of football. What do director of footballs want in a simplistic ideal world? Control and power and money. Well, at Chelsea would have had the latter anyway. At West Ham he's got neither. A good scarf, that's what we can offer him at West Ham. You can have a scarf. And how do you like being thrown under the bus in the media, Tim? We do a bit of that as well, but we'll recruit your brother and your mate, we'll take them in too. Anyway, enough about that. But so why is he perfect for Tim Steidten? Well, actually, I don't think he is. I think there'd be coaches out there that would suit Tim Steidten far, far more. However, in regards to Sullivan and Tim Steidten, what they both want out of the next manager, I think as a combination, this might be as good as it gets, because there's going to have to be compromise on both sides here. Because I'd imagine what one wants, the other one doesn't. In regards to Steidten, though, struggling to have power at West Ham, if you believe the reports, which I do believe those ones, because of the January transfer window. There's now evidence to suggest that he's not got his fingerprints over everything that he would perhaps like. He's spoken about planning for the next summer transfer window, which is good. But it did feel a little bit like Steidten was trying to distance himself from the January transfer window. I think one of the factors preventing Tim Steidten having the control that a traditional director of football at a club would like is David Moyes. Now, this isn't a criticism of David Moyes, because David Moyes he's old. So let's say old-fashioned, old school, whatever, but it's because he's old. When he was a manager at Everton, all this stuff didn't exist. The scouting was different, the transfer recruitment was different, everything was different when David Moyes was breaking through as a Premier League manager compared to what it is today. So how football looks today is a hell of a lot different to how it looked at Everton. And Moyes trusts his way of doing things. Moyes probably wants to continue doing his way of things. And I don't blame him for that. That's not Moyes' fault. That's just how Moyes has done things and how he believes things should be done. Football is different now. It evolves. It's constantly evolving. There's no such thing as standing still in football. You ain't going forward. You're going backwards, as simple as that. And I think Moyes has evolved in some regards to football. Not all of it, but some of it. And I think he's, met the new model halfway. I think he's done a little bit of it, not completely. He wants some control, but I think he's relinquished some. But I think Steidten would want more. Thomas Tuchel has worked under this infrastructure pretty much his entire career. When he started at Mainz, I think it was Mainz, there would have been people in charge of the transfer. The German model is completely different to the English model. It's still relatively new to a lot of clubs, including West Ham over here. But in Germany, this is just normal to have a director of football, a sport director, technical director, whatever the terminology is in regards to that person at that club. But someone else in charge of player recruitment is standard in the Bundesliga. So when he came through at Mainz, it was normal. When he went to Dortmund after Jurgen Klopp, which was actually the first team that probably got me interested in the Bundesliga, Jurgen Klopp's Dortmund. So when Tuchel took over, I have seen quite a lot of Tuchel's Dortmund, and I liked it. It was good attacking football. If I remember correctly, it was some time ago now. They did really well in the league. They won the German Cup, but he was difficult to manage. And this is something that's been present during Tuchel's time. I'm not clued up about his time at Mainz in order to speak about it enough, whether he was difficult enough. But certainly at Dortmund, I remember when he left, the CEO said, fantastic coach, incredible tactician, but just very difficult to work with. He went to PSG. I don't know anything about his time there. I don't follow French football. I don't have enough time to follow French football, so I couldn't tell you anything that happened with Tuchel at PSG. But the impression I get from that club is that it's a bit of a basket case. He took over from Unai Emery and then went to Chelsea. Now, we all know plenty of him from his time at Chelsea. I think the football was okay. It wasn't what you would call free-flowing attacking football, is it? Tactical. It was very tactical. He's very detailed in how his team approaches games, and you've seen that at Chelsea. Now sometimes it's a bit defensive, but usually it works, and I think this can be the difference between a really good defensive manager and a really average defensive manager, where one yields results. He won the Champions League with Chelsea. Now the football, I'm not saying the football was boring all the time, but there was games I remember tuning into with Tuchel in charge at Chelsea, and it wasn't an entertaining one. However, tactically it probably was entertaining. If you were switching it on wanting end-to-end fast football, you weren't getting that from Tuchel. But if you were switching it on looking for small detail in the game that shows the manager's prepared and is trying to get one up on another manager, then that's what you're looking for. You look at the Champions League final when he beat Pep's Man City, the way that Tuchel won that tactical battle was fantastic. Now obviously it got ugly towards the end. Again, how much can you associate? And this is the problem. You look at the Bayern Munich one as well. Now, funny enough, I've not seen much of him at Bayern Munich. If I watch German football, I'll maybe watch one live game a weekend and catch up on the highlights of the rest of them. Bayern Munich ain't one I'm tuning into, bar 2 weeks ago, but they were playing Bayer Leverkusen. I was watching Bayer Leverkusen rather than the Bayern Munich aspect of it, but it was such a big title race, it was hard to ignore that 6-pointer game. But he's not, he won the Bundesliga last season, very lucky. This season he's probably not going to win it. But with Bayern Munich, with Chelsea, with PSG, there's almost an asterisk next to it, which is set up to fail. How's the manager meant to succeed at that club? On one hand, you could argue that Tuchel succeeded to some extent in Germany last season and at Chelsea, despite the club being chaotic. But on the other hand, Tuchel contributes to the chaos there. He struggled to get on with people at Dortmund. At Chelsea, he fell out with his superiors again. So he is a difficult manager to manage. But he is also used to working in infrastructure. Now, it doesn't mean he likes it. However, with a bit of a power struggle at West Ham at the minute, this may give some of that control to Steidten that he is supposedly and reportedly seeking. Now, the good news in terms of Tim Steidten is that The Athletic did an article today in regards to Liverpool's pursuit of a sporting director, because Schmatke is leaving, and there was no mention of Tim Steidten whatsoever. And I think the title of the article was something like, what do we know? What do we know about Liverpool's search? And it mentioned some names such as Edwards and Mitchell, and about how they're going about it and who they're looking for, and why there has been problems in the past with Jurgen Klopp's influence in regards to the transfer committee at Liverpool. But not once was Tim Steidten mentioned, which I found interesting because I trust the Athletic. I think it's a really good source when it comes to football journalism, especially when it's not your team. So if I want an insight into Liverpool, I can listen to the fans to get their opinions on things. But in terms of news and sort of facts and behind the scenes stuff, I think the Athletic's a really good place to start for it. No mention of Tim Steidten, that's good. Hans and his brothers joined, that's good. I'm still not buying into as much because those wheels were already rolling before Schmatke was announced to be leaving Liverpool. So that transfers of those two to West Ham were already in progress before Schmatke was leaving Liverpool. So things change. It's still possible. Steidten can still leave this summer regardless of us hiving his brother and his mate, regardless of that. But it may not keep Steidten, but it may help keep Steidten, that he's got them in place. Because while so far it looks like he struggled to yield his power in the January transfer window, we've now got a situation coming up with the actual manager potentially, where Steidten's going to have a say in it. Whether we back him or not remains to be seen. But at least we're doing it in one department, which is he's in charge of the recruitment team. And that's obviously, listen, that's bog standard. The guy responsible for the player identification must be in charge of the recruitment team. It's good that we're allowing him to bring in his own people. It's vital. We're doing that. That's good. What else can we do to support Tim Steidten? Give him a bit more control over the player recruitment, and also potentially bring in his own manager. Is Tuchel his manager? We don't know yet. We don't know. But I do think, say, be worth the punt. I think he's got a fantastic footballing CV. I feel almost confident that it will go wrong eventually, that it wouldn't be a long-term appointment for him because of his history with more than one club. Pretty much every club he's been at, he's fell out with his superiors. So there is an issue there already. But this is where you're sort of trying to balance it up a little bit. Are we wanting a long-term project here? Because I've never used the word project on this channel because I don't believe there is one. It gets touted about. Players say I bought into what project? I'm yet to see evidence of a project. So are we wanting a long-term one? If the answer is yes, and I don't think Thomas Tuchel's the man. But if the answer is we need somebody in short-term while we get other stuff in order, because we're trying to do a lot of things at once potentially here. Overhaul the recruitment team. Possibly replace Lucas Paqueta. Possibly replace the manager. It's a lot of stuff to be doing in one go. Some of the shares will hopefully be getting sold very soon because of Gold's estate. There's a lot of changes happening at West Ham. So can you implement a long-term project? Or is actually the best thing to do look after the club short-term? And if that is the case, and it doesn't always work, sometimes it does. It doesn't always work, but sometimes it does. But I think Thomas Tuchel would be the perfect appointment for David Sullivan and Tim Steidten, so they both get what they want. But the only problem is, because of Thomas Tuchel's history, I think it's almost guaranteed to go wrong at some point. Now, I enjoyed his football at Dortmund. Like I said, it just ended badly. PSG, don't know about. Chelsea, he did well there. He won the Champions League. This is a guy that's won trophies. His football is not the most entertaining you'll ever see, but it's detailed, it's tactical. He's just difficult to control. But I do feel, though, every manager's going to have an issue at the club, and that is the people above him at West Ham. So, does it matter who we bring in? Because I think falling out with the manager is something that's on the cards, regardless of who we bring in. So it's maybe a case of best of a bad bunch to some extent. I'm not saying Tuchel's a bad bunch, but if you know it's going to go wrong, it's probably going to go wrong anyway. In regards to him wanting to come back to England, well, if that's true, let's face it, he's not good enough for Liverpool. I'm going to say he's not good enough for Liverpool. Man City job ain't coming up. Arsenal job ain't coming up. There's talk about Man United. I can't see it. I think they'll keep Ten Hag for another season at least. Not getting the Aston Villa job anytime soon. Brighton, I can't see him, even if De Zerbi leaves, I don't think Brighton, maybe they will afford him. I'm not sure. I can't see him going to Brighton because they are a club that likes stability. This ain't a stable appointment. Newcastle, possibly, but it would require Eddie Howe to finish the season poorly. So I think if he wants to come back to the Premier League, I think West Ham is possibly his best bet as well. In terms of ticking off what David Sullivan wants, I think Thomas Tuchel's possibly the best bet. But keep Tim Steidten happy. We'll have to wait and see. Anyway, let me know what you think about the links to Thomas Tuchel in the comments below. If you've enjoyed this video, please do drop a like on it by clicking thumbs up. Subscribe to Thomas Chat. Catch up with you tomorrow.